All right, folks, brace yourselves. Even now, in 2025, sometimes I am still surprised by the audacity and shamelessness of right wing pro MAGA media outlets like Fox News. But even by their typical standards, this is pretty stunning. Earlier today, Fox News issued a public tweet indicating that so called liberal media outlets should face consequences for their coverage or lack thereof of President Biden's age and mental decline. The same Fox News that just 2 years ago had to pay the single biggest defamation settlement in the history of the United States, $787 million, because they knowingly signal boosted the lies of Donald Trump about the 2020 election. They are throwing stones in a glass house and seemingly are trying to get the Trump administration to impose consequences on their liberal peers. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Yeah, again, even by the hypocrisy and lack of self-awareness of MAGA media, this is pretty stunning. As Mediaite reports, Fox News Post asks, should liberal outlets face consequences for not covering Biden's decline? Fox News raised eyebrows on Tuesday, I'll say, with a post on X asking if liberal outlets should face consequences over how they covered or did not cover President Biden's mental fitness while he was in office. Fox's social media team clipped a segment from Outnumbered on Tuesday discussing Jake Tapper calling the cover-up around Biden's decline a potentially bigger scandal than Watergate, which is eye-roll worthy, and captioned the clip by writing, quote, should liberal outlets like CNN face consequences for ignoring the signs, even after years of receiving tips about Biden's decline? And there's the tweet right there, and I reacted to it, and we'll get to that in just a second. The post added, Jake Tapper now admits the cover-up may be worse than Watergate, but CNN didn't acknowledge it until the Trump-Biden debate. Fox News had been reporting on Biden's cognitive struggles and the inner circle's efforts to hide it as far back as 2020. The Fox Post comes amid heightened attacks on the media by President Donald Trump, who is suing CBS and working to defund NPR and PBS, all of which he views as critics. In the segment that the clip is from, Outnumbered co-host and former Trump press secretary Kayleigh McEnany says, quote, a series of newly published books are detailing the links to which former President Biden's inner circle allegedly went to shield you all, the American people, from his decline. And now Jake Tapper, who wrote one of those books, says he believes the apparent cover-up of Biden's mental decline may go down as bigger than, wait for it, Watergate. Quote, it is a scandal. It is without question, and maybe even worse than Watergate in some ways, because Richard Nixon was in control of his faculties when he wasn't drinking, says Tapper in a clip from Piers Morgan Uncensored. Quote, and so the idea that, yeah, we don't mean to exonerate. The only reason that we have the Watergate thing is there because we quote Archibald Cox, who had an interest in keeping that president propped up, adds the CNN anchor. McEnany and her co-host then took turns agreeing with Tapper, but also pulled no punches in accusing him of being part of the cover-up. Again, hilarious. Tapper's getting it from all ends. People are not happy with him on either side of this, no matter how much he tries to kiss MAGA's ass. But, I called Laura Trump and apologized. I begged for her forgiveness. It's so funny. I mean, he's finding no redemption with the very audience he's trying to curry. But enough about Jake Tapper. Let's focus on this. So this is the post from Fox News. Should liberal media outlets like CNN face consequences for ignoring the signs, even after years of receiving tips about Biden's decline? Jake Tapper now admits the cover-up may be worse than Watergate, but CNN didn't acknowledge it until the Trump-Biden debate. Fox News had been reporting blah, blah, blah. That's the post. To which I replied, Fox probably shouldn't want to set this sort of precedent and should be very grateful that the previous administration isn't as petty and vengeful as this one. And I quote, a segment or a screenshot of PBS, Fox News to pay $787 million settlement to Dominion Voting System over stolen election lies from April 18th, 2023. A different post of mine was a bit more concise, and it's told Fox to shut the fuck up while still quoting the same screenshot. So just want to remind you of what happened in that landmark case, which should have been reputationally crippling for Fox News. The single biggest defamation settlement in the history of this country over a stolen election, which wasn't stolen. It was free and fair, and they knew it. And the discovery documents revealed they knew that to be true. They knew that Trump lost fair and square, but they were so worried about losing viewers to Newsmax and OAN and afraid of pissing off Trump that they signal boosted his lies anyway. That's why they settled the case despite robust First Amendment protections. Do you understand? With an organization as successful as Fox News, as powerful as Fox News, for them to settle and pay nearly $1 billion to make this case go away despite having the advantage of the First Amendment, which makes it very hard to win a defamation case. They knew they were fucked. They knew that they were going to lose this case and potentially lose big, and that's why they rolled over. But let's go down memory lane just to really understand the audacity and shamelessness of Fox News to put out a tweet like this. This is from the New York Times, a $787.5 million settlement and embarrassing disclosures, the costs of airing a lie. Fox News' late-night agreement with Dominion Voting Systems came with a rare acknowledgement of broadcasting false claims by the conservative media powerhouse. In settling with Dominion Voting Systems, Fox News was avoided an excruciating, drawn-out trial in which its founding chief, Rupert Murdoch, its top managers, and its biggest stars would have had to face hostile grilling on an embarrassing question. Why did they allow a virulent and defamatory conspiracy theory about the 2020 election to spread across the network when so many of them know it to be false? But the $787.5 million settlement agreement, among the largest defamation settlements in history, and Fox's courthouse statement recognizing that the court had found, quote, certain claims about Dominion aired on its programming, quote, to be false, at the very least amount to a rare, high-profile acknowledgement of informational wrongdoing by a powerhouse in conservative media and America's most popular cable network. Quote, money is accountability, said Stephen Shackelford, a Dominion lawyer. Quote, and we got that today from Fox. The terms of the agreement, which was abruptly announced just before lawyers were expected to make opening statements, did not require Fox to apologize for any wrongdoing in its own programming, and they should have pushed for that, by the way. Dominion should have pushed for that, a point that Dominion was said to have been pressing for. Shortly after the agreement was reached, Fox said it was, quote, hopeful that our decision to resolve this dispute with Dominion amicably instead of acrimony of a divisive trial allows the country to move forward from these issues. The settlement carries an implicit plea of no contest to several pre-trial findings from the presiding judge in the case, Eric Davis, that cast Fox programming in exceptionally harsh light. In one of those findings, the judge sided with Dominion in its assertion that Fox could not claim that its airing of the conspiracy theory, generally related to the false claim that its machine switched Trump votes to Biden votes, fell under a legally protected status of news gathering that can shield news organizations when facts are disputed. The judge wrote, quote, the evidence does not support that FNN conducted good faith, disinterested reporting. In another finding, the judge wrote that, quote, the evidence developed in the civil proceeding demonstrates this is crystal clear that none of the statements related to Dominion about the 2020 election are true. Through these findings, the judge seriously limited Fox's ability to argue it was acting as a news network pursuing the claims of a newsmaker, in this case, the President of the United States, who was the lead clarion for the false Dominion narrative. In those heady days before the first day of trial, Fox had been indicating that it would lose at trial, it would work up an appeal that would, at least partly, argue with those judicial rulings. Now, they stand undisputed. By the end of the day Tuesday, it was clear that Fox's lawyers were engaged in an urgent calculus to take the financial hit rather than losing at trial. And so many legal experts before the trial argued Dominion had managed to collect an unusual amount of internal documentation from Fox showing many inside the company knew the Dominion election conspiracy theory was pure fantasy that extended to the network's highest ranks, right up to Murdoch himself. That evidence appeared to bring Dominion close to the legal threshold in defamation cases known as actual malice, established when defamatory statements are, quote, made with knowledge of its falsity or with reckless disregard of whether it was true or not. That bar, however, is not always easy to meet, and there are no guarantees in front of a jury. Quote, Dominion Voting had elicited much critical evidence that Fox had acted with actual malice or reckless disregard for the truth, which it could have proved to a jury, so the only question remaining would have been damages, said Carl Tobias, a law professor at University of Richmond. Quote, trial of the case might also have undermined the reputation of Fox when the evidence was presented in open court. It was less surprising that Fox settled than it did so at such a late stage Tuesday. A trial would have seen Fox News personnel and Murdoch pairing with lawyers over the knowledge of the falsity they held and why they did not take any action to stop it. The answers would have further unmasked the internal modus operandi of an organization that has long guarded its internal operations. The one question that only time will answer is whether the settlement is enough to cause Fox to change the way it handles such incendiary and defamatory conspiracy content. It hasn't. The amount is huge, $787.5 million. Fox News certainly doesn't want to see a similar settlement anytime soon as other illegal cases loom, notably a $2.7 billion suit from another election technology company, Smartmatic. So, let's be very clear about this. The same network that is now like, dude, I mean, God, should CNN face consequences for ignoring the signs? We'll get to that in a second. They're at the most charitable interpretation is that they're throwing stones in a glass house. And again, like I said in my tweet, they should be grateful. that the previous administration, the Biden administration, is not as petty and vengeful as this administration, the Trump administration, that Fox is clearly wanting to be even more petty and vengeful. They know Donald Trump watches their programming. So when you ask a question like that, I mean, should they face consequences? Think about it. The current president is a vengeful, petty man, Donald Trump, who watches Fox obsessively and whose administration is already going after media outlets that he doesn't like. And in his private capacity as a private citizen who still happens to be the president of the United States, he is suing the shit out of people and media outlets he doesn't like. So I think it's a reasonable interpretation to speculate, are they trying to put this, hey Trump, go after CNN, go after MSNBC. We're gonna pre-frame this. We're gonna try to give you the public permission structure to do what you probably want to do already, because of course Trump has repeatedly threatened to go after the media. So they want Trump clearly to be even more petty and vengeful and to take a pound of flesh out of the so-called liberal media. But imagine how they would feel. Just imagine a counterfactual. Imagine a more petty and vindictive Democratic president. Imagine Joe Biden going, you know what? You guys were so dishonest about the 2020 election that you all paid, despite your lawyers, despite your status as a news network, despite your popularity, you all folded in a defamation case. And you knowingly signal boosted Trump's 2020 election lies. Those are foundational. That's a foundational threat to the republic. You sowing unnecessary questions and concerns in our election integrity, that's a threat to democracy. You know what? Since you basically rolled over and all but admitted guilt, I guess I'm going to have my Justice Department and my FCC look into you further. This was a civil case, right? Well, now I think the government needs to get involved. Imagine if Joe Biden had said something like that, or if prominent Democrats urged President Biden to do something like that. That would have been an easy predicate to understand. Well, shit. I mean, Fox lied their asses off about the 2020 election, signal boosted these lies knowingly. Guess it makes sense for the government to get involved, right? Should they face consequences for ignoring the fact that Trump got his ass kicked in a free and fair election because he's a fucking loser? How would Fox have reacted? They'd have been terrified, and understandably so. Instead, they were dealing with a morally superior administration that, despite its faults, is better than Donald Trump. And so it never occurred to Biden and his allies to do what Trump is doing to other media outlets, and what Fox seems to really want Trump to do to even more media outlets now. And this is something, quite frankly, that Democrats are really going to have to wrestle with. Because if this be Trump targeting so-called liberal media and mainstream media, and his FCC is targeting the so-called liberal media with surgical precision. Again, the legal director for FIRE, a libertarian free speech organization, which has gone after Democrats, liberals, progressives, so-called liberal colleges, I mean, just relentlessly. Their bona fides are there. They say that Trump's attacks on free speech are unprecedented in scope, scale, and severity. In other words, Trump is objectively worse on going after free speech than any Democrat, than any liberal. He's more censorious, more dangerous, a greater threat to free speech than any of them. So imagine, as they've documented, what Trump is doing with all these other organizations. Imagine the next Democratic administration. What are they going to do? Because maybe the only way to get through to the right is, I guess, just we continue down this path, right? The Trump administration targets, again, media outlets that they find critical of them, and maybe Democrats are going to have to start doing the same thing when they're in power against conservative or pro-MAGA outlets. And until one or both sides say, okay, you know what, let's call a truce. I don't know. All I know is that what Trump is doing has no Democratic counterpart. Democrats have never done. President Biden has never done what Donald Trump is doing right now, and what Fox seems so eager to get Trump to do even more of. And maybe that's going to have to change with the Democratic Party. Maybe that will be the only way to create a limiting principle within the GOP. Is say, if you go down this road, then that means in 2028, if there is a Democratic administration, maybe they will have to look into Fox even harder based on what happened in 2020. Now, I don't know if there are applicable laws or if there's a statute of limitation, because that would have been, at that point, 8 or 9 years. I don't know. But I am just stunned by the audacity of Fox to make a fucking tweet like this when they were also the ones who had to pay an unprecedented settlement because they signal boosted lies about a major, major issue in the United States, the 2020 election. Stunning to me. Last thing I'll say is even their premise is wrong. President Biden's age and mental fitness were the most covered aspect of the 2024 election, period. And Donald Trump was the victim of an assassination attempt. And Biden's age and mental fitness still got more coverage. There were editorial board op-eds begging him to withdraw. He should drop out of the race from so-called liberal publications. They covered it. They discussed it. They wrote op-ed after analysis. People like me were getting annoyed because they were covering it far more than Donald Trump. And my position was hold them to the same damn standard. They're both of comparable age. Donald Trump also has other, seeming mental issues like malignant narcissism and other, personality defects that merit attention. But Biden's age and mental fitness were the most scrutinized aspect of the 2024 election. And it wasn't just Fox News. Liberal outlets, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Reuters, the Associated Press, Vice, everybody was talking about it in one way, shape, or another. We talked about it even on this channel, even though I was unabashedly pro-Biden when the only other choice was Trump. My position was that President Biden should not have ran for re-election, but if he's the Democratic nominee, you bet your ass I'm going to vote for him over Donald Trump, who is also old, who is also in an age-related cognitive decline, but unlike Biden, is really stupid even on a good day. Biden's a smart guy. On a good day, on a bad day, he's still a smart guy. Donald Trump is stupid even on his best day. And Trump is also an authoritarian, malignant narcissist. And then when Biden dropped out of the race, which is the other thing, this thing was so scrutinized that President Biden was ultimately pressured into withdrawing from the race. That's how potent this topic was. This idea that there was this wildly successful, mass-coordinated conspiracy to conceal Biden's age. Jon Stewart did a brilliant takedown of this bullshit talking point about a week ago. I don't fault anybody if they want to cover presidents' age and cognitive issues or former presidents. I have no issue with that. But this idea, and not to defend Jake Tapper here, but Jake Tapper was also covering Biden's gaffes and issues during the 2024 campaign. This idea that he totally ignored it is ridiculous. So even the premise is wrong. But they are wanting liberal outlets to face consequences when they themselves have no credibility on this sort of issue. And they're calling for it anyway. Their shamelessness, their audacity, it's their superpower. And they're going to continue for the next 3.5 years. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.